Hello, can you hear me? Okay, weird, but let's hope it works. Thanks for the feedback, everyone. And I see people are slowly joining, so let's give them 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll kick off the webinar. One more minute to go. And then it's now 2 minutes after the clock. With that being said, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, and for the people that joined the morning session today, once again, excuse for the inconvenience with the audio. We hope it's going through now today. If not, we will reorganize another webinar then via Microsoft Teams, and we'll get you a recording of there. But let's hope it runs through and this recording goes right. So let's be in a good spirit, and let's start with maximizing equipment utilization with Dynamics Rental Management. That's the purpose and the goal of today's webinar. We have a simple agenda with us. We start with some introductions, introduction to myself, where am I, the presenter, and then an introduction towards HSO innovation. Then we're going to jump into some theoretical details of our product, and then I'm going to show you the latest and greatest that we've developed with our product team, as well as show you how you indeed can maximize and get the most out of your rental equipment fleets. At the end, it says Q&A. In a minute, I'm going to explain you the webinar guidelines. There's the questions section. Should you have any questions, my colleagues and myself will be monitoring the chat, and at the end of the session, we'll get back to you on these questions. That being said, let's kick it off. As I said, there's webinar guidelines. Audio is enabled only for the presenter. Should audio not be working, please contact info@innovation.com. And yeah, should you have any other questions, you can also put them into the chat. As mentioned, please use there for the questions and answers pane. And be aware this presentation is being recorded, so the recording will be shared later on with you, as well as the PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to showcase today. Short introduction to myself. My name is Max Dinzer, pre-sales consultant at HSO Innovation. Sometimes I jokingly say Chief Entertainment Officer. And at HSO Innovation, we believe it's important to introduce yourself from a personal side, because we deliver products and projects, and project implementations can be something that takes a while, and that can be a tough scenario. So therefore, it's good to know the people behind the screen, because obviously via this webinar, we can't meet in person. So you should know who is sitting behind the screen. And from a business perspective, as I said, I'm a pre-sales consultant, and they're mainly responsible for companies that have to do with assets. And that is obviously typically for the world of rentals, but I also consult customers in the world of field service, maintenance management, anything that has to do with the condition of an asset. That's my main focus customers, where I specialize in, as well as I also help HSO promoting our global IP. From a personal standpoint, big soccer enthusiast, Eintracht Frankfurt fan. You can see me and my lovely family Christmas a couple of years ago. Next to that, I do like to work out a lot more the cardio-oriented kind of sports. And the last picture stands for my hometown, which is Bad Dürkheim, which is close to Mannheim and Frankfurt in Germany. And that is actually a picture of the largest white wine festival of the world. So if you should like wine, then feel free at the end of September to come over, give us a visit, and try some good Riesling wine. So much about myself. Allow me to introduce you into the company, HSO Innovation. And HSO Innovation is the department within the HSO group that's a so-called global ISV. So independent software vendor. We developed and maintain our own solutions. We build them on top of the Microsoft Dynamics 365 ecosystem. We build solutions on top of ERP, CRM, but also on top of Azure, Microsoft's cloud platform. And we also connect things like Office 365 and SharePoint and improve them from that standpoint. We do that with more than 55 strategic partners. Obviously, one of them is HSO, but we also implement with other partners like, for example, Avanade, Protware, DXC, different kind of capabilities. And yeah, we support customers globally from that kind of standpoint. That being said, let's jump into the solution itself and get into some theoretical background around it. But before we really jump into the solution, I would like to have a look at the markets that we are actually looking for. Rental for us is one of our key focus markets at HSO due to the product that we have. And therefore, we face a lot of pre-sales, customer requests, customer requirements. And we also see the industry changing over the recent years. Some really logical things are, of course, the circular economy as well as sustainability as a topic. Of course, the world is changing. We need to meet CO2 goals. We need to be compliant to the green pacts that are going on the world. And therefore, rental is actually a big driver of that, because the rental industry itself is, of course, a sustainable concept, reusing equipment as many times as possible and getting the most out of it. So therefore, I think we are in a really futuristic industry and see a bright future for that from an HSO standpoint as well, but also for our customers. But to be really sustainable and to get the best insights into that and to achieve our goal of today's presentation, maximizing equipment utilization, it is important that companies go through a digital transformation and get better insights on how their rental operations are actually performing. We also see that rental is shifting away from the typical rental scenario that, well, I rent an equipment and I pay maybe a monthly, weekly, or daily fee for it, towards a more service-driven aspect. Rental companies want to bind customers also from a long-term perspective, as well as rental companies want to improve their utilization as well as their profits in offering more and more services around their rental operations. So think about installation jobs they perform, cleaning jobs they perform. You see a picture of an excavator, as well as some of our customers, they operate cranes. So you also want to offer the driving services around that. So the customer basically has a 360-degree service package that allows him to have a really simple and convenient rental throughout the process. Next to that, we also see that more and more original equipment manufacturers that used to sell their products turn to rental because they believe they can earn more profit out of it, as well as it's a sustainable model and therefore a common theme in the market at the moment. And therefore, we see competition going on between the typical rental companies and the original equipment manufacturers coming into the game. We also see that there's continued tight capital. We all just hopefully survived in a positive manner a COVID pandemic, as well as there is talks about financial crises going on. Inflation is rising, and also companies feel that, not only private persons. Capital is tight, and that is another driver for the rental industry, because in essence, renting is cheaper than obviously buying an equipment. So we see a bright future ahead, but we want to support the rental companies in managing the growing demands that we expect in the future. And therefore, how could the future of rental look like? Because processes are going to change. Obviously, mobile applications are taking the industry by storm. New technologies like artificial intelligence, like IoT are rising, but also capabilities of better optimizing the allocation of your assets from a graphical standpoint, knowing where your equipment is exactly are, as well as in-depth utilization analysis, because any kind of cost and revenue can be captured against it. So real-time tracking of the usage of your equipment. And also, we have a nice example of a customer of ours that is called Bredenort. They are in the power generators, and they actually said, I want to be so smart that if my customer doesn't pay, I want to turn down the power generator for him. So really speaking to the equipment while being remote is a trend that we see as well. And then, as I already said, transferring from renting a product to more renting services to build up these relationships, you need a business application that supports that. And about the capital aspect, we see there's a need to cut down on operational costs to still achieve the most sophisticated margins that you could achieve, and also create new business models. Next to just turning down the power generator, Bredenort actually fully switched from a typical rental rate into a consumption-driven billing perspective. Power by the hour, they call it. So the customer pays for what he basically consumes. And these are business models that we see growing in the rental market and offering new capabilities around that. And that's why we've built Dynamics Rental Management a couple of years ago and are still maintaining and further developing it from that aspect. Dynamics Rental Management is also a preferred solution on Microsoft App Stores. Not many solutions have that aspect. That also means Microsoft actively co-sells this application with us. So if you call Microsoft, we are one of the sophisticated partners that Microsoft recommends. But it also means it meets the highest standard of Microsoft development. Therefore, we always make sure that our solution is compliant to the latest and greatest of Microsoft. If Microsoft introduces new capabilities, our product development team makes sure that we are compliant to them and you can leverage these capabilities. It also means that there's a product roadmap and a team behind it that will further develop this application to meet the latest demand of the market. If we then look at the industries that we support from a rental perspective, our main focus is on equipment rentals. So as you can see in the picture, for example, a power generator, heavy serialized equipment where you want to maximize your return on investment, itemized assets, but also bulk rental. Think of things that are non-serialized. For example, cables or scaffolding are good examples around that. And in essence, we say anything that is really project-driven rental. So a good example for that is anything that is related to the construction industry. So construction-driven rental is what we specialize in. And next to that, we also see that event rentals or electronic rentals, think about cameras, for example, is something where we had a lot of success recently as well. And therefore, these are the rental types that we support. So the solution is not meant for the typical car rental or housing rental market. It's really for equipment and itemized rental businesses. And that is also what you can recognize in our focus markets. I was talking about generators already, construction, scaffolding. We have a lot of customers in material handling, mining, pump rentals, but also electronics and system rentals. That is what we typically see as our customers, anything that has a project character behind it or that focus indeed on the equipment rental aspect. And there, from a short-term rental, long-term rental or leasing perspective, we can cater for it all. If you then look at our solution map for all of our products, we have a so-called solution map that should quickly give you an overview of the capabilities of the tools. What is important to understand, our solution is built on top of Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and supply chain management. So that's Microsoft Business ERP application. And we leverage the database and the key components of that ERP system and build our rental suite on top of it. So that means you can create the standard project, you can do a construction project plan, work breakdown structure, create everything, and you can create your rental orders and rental operations alongside that. We leverage standard financial modules. So if you create an invoice in our rental module, it will end up in the financial components of Dynamics 365. Same for the physical flow of equipment. We process logistics through standard Dynamics 365. Posting a packing slip is going through the inventory and warehouse management modules of D365. as well as the same is applicable for resources and production. On top of that, in the two more darker blue boxes, you see our two main entities, a fixed asset and a rental object. You might now say that that's the same, but think twice. Not always a rental object is a fixed asset of yours, because typically we see that the rental company never says no. So you actually want to rent out equipment that maybe doesn't belong to you. Right? You either get that from a preferred vendor and rent it from them and then rent it in your name, or you say, I'm a national company and maybe I'm located in Germany, but I also have some depots, some stock, and some fixed assets in the Netherlands that belong to the Dutch entity, and therefore I'm going to get equipment from them and then rent it out in my. So we detached these two capabilities, but we synchronized them. So it's two different entities, two different viewpoints looking at the system. Fixed assets purely from a financial perspective. We can do acquisitions, depreciation schedules, non-itemized fixed assets as well, and disposals. So the whole life cycle of a fixed asset can be managed with our module. And next to that, we have a rental object entity that is there for shipping the goods, for attaching pricing profiles, product dimensions, charging calendars, and also creating so-called rental kits. Now, think about material handling. You might have a forklift, you have different forks, wheels, sizes, configurations, components that you would like to add on that forklift. And therefore, you can create a so-called rental kit. And then on top of that, we have the more operational processes, managing rental inquiries, doing intercompany rentals, quotes, contracts, invoicing, a graphical availability and planning boards for your rental operations, and of course, a whole service module and service process around that. So you're able to do pre-post rental inspections, but also maintenance schedules, and then a price engine that allows us to do best rate calculations. A bit deeper explanation into the rental object entity. As I said, it is separated from the fixed asset, but synchronizes with the fixed asset. So if one record is being updated in one area, it's also updated in the other area if you synchronize it. And we also have a so-called service object, and that's then from a service perspective, looking at it. So attaching the maintenance plan, service tasks, and addresses, because you can imagine in a scenario, something might be a sales item, and then it's just purely a service object and an item. Something might be a rental object, but doesn't belong to you, then it's an item, a service object, and a rental object. And if it belongs to you as a fixed asset, it's all four. And that allows us to drive any kind of operation through any kind of operational process from a rental, project, service, logistic, or even selling perspective, because in the end, you might want to sell your fixed asset as well. And that allows us to basically picture this high-level rental process that you can see in this screen now. Starting from a customer, going into a quotation. On that quote, we put the rental object and his whole kit and pricing structure. If we have the happy flow and we win the quote, we turn it into an actual rental contract. On the rental contract, we can provide services like pre and post rental inspections, installation jobs, regular checks, any kind of other operating service that you might have alongside that. And in the end, also off rent and return the equipment, because that is of course the typical rental thing. And the difference to a standard ERP system. An ERP system is designed to sell, similar like Dynamics 365 finance and supply chain management. And with our module, we can get the equipment back as well. And in the end, we could even sell the equipment towards the customer. On top of that, you see the beauty of the Microsoft platform as well. And I'm going to show you some examples of that later. We can create any kind of these processes in a mobile app via Power Apps. You can report on it with Power BI. We have an Azure IoT integration on our rental order line. So if you want to do consumption billing based on an IoT perspective, we can do that as well. And we support the cross-rental process, so renting equipment from a different vendor. And that allows us, and gets me to my last PowerPoint slide, that allows us to create a so-called 360-degree asset lifecycle view, starting from either purchasing or manufacturing the equipment, dependent if you're an OEM or a rental company, over activating it, assigning it towards your fleet, maybe allocating it to a different branch and yard, installing, modifying, configuring, and repairing the equipment over the life cycle, renting it out towards customers, refurbishing it after the rentals, and in the end, maybe reuse, scrap it, sell it for different purposes. That being said, let's jump into the solution. And before we jump into the solution, there is one sentence in the middle of the screen that I would like you to read. That's how I typically like to start my presentations, because that sentence is actually a quote of a former CEO of ABB. And that quote says, "If you knew what you know, you would be unbeatable." And that's a metaphor to talk about the topic of big data. And next to just a standard rental ERP application, our product also comes with a lot of benefits. For example, this out-of-the-box rental BI dashboard. This BI dashboard is having some best practice KPIs that we typically see in the rental industry, like physical and financial utilization. And we will get back to this dashboard at the end of the presentation again, because our goal is, of course, maximizing this utilization and getting better insights into that. But I think it's also important to understand that Power BI has the capability of allowing you to really understand how are my rental operations going. Because we're going to process a lot of transactions today, we're going to have rental contracts, we're going to schedule certain things, create services around of that. All of that creates a lot of transactions. And especially if you are a large company, these transactions become a lot. And to better visualize them and to better understand your data, you need to create insights. They say data is the gold of the current century. I believe data can even be a diamond of the current century, but similar like a diamond, you first need to work on it. You need to visualize your data, you need to prepare your data, and you need to get good insights into that. And this BI dashboard is a beautiful example of it. It has multiple tabs where you can really drill down into your rental operation, deeper insights into utilization, maybe even a whole utilization table to compare your fleet, which assets are utilizing quite well. How many of them do I have in the fleet? How many days on rent have they been? What is the actual revenue that I make by the product? What is the expected revenue? Compare average rates that I can achieve. So this really gives you deep insights into how's my fleet actually performing. And then we can also track things from a location perspective, where you then can, for example, check where is my business currently operating, as well as what kind of customers do I have, how many objects do they have in place. So you get an overview of your rental operation. And most important, and I think therefore this decomposition tree is a nice example, is that we can also slice and dice the data. So for example, I want to know how much of my total revenue belongs to which item group, which salesperson has maybe achieved that, and in which warehouse has he achieved certain capabilities. So that allows me to really drill down into these different operations and get the most out of my data. That being said, let's jump into the tool itself. And I see it slept on me there. But let's load up my Dynamics 365 ERP application again. So for users of Dynamics 365, this should be a familiar picture. And that's your starting screen where you have all of your workspaces. And here on the left on the navigation pane, you get your modules. And if you buy our application, you actually get multiple components of it. And one of it is Dynamics Rental Management. You can also get our own service module, but you could leverage an external service tool, like for example, ServiceNow or Dynamics 365 Field Service or Microsoft's Enterprise Asset Management. All of that is open. We have open entities for that. And for the Microsoft applications, we also have out-of-the-box integrations to these components. If we then look at rental management, you can see that I now have the list of all of my entities. And where I usually like to start is with my rental object search, because my rental object search is the screen where I have the overview of all of my rental operations and where I also see my complete fleet. So now you can see that this is the overview of my crane fleet. I can create different category hierarchies and allocate rental equipment towards that. I can drill down in these category hierarchies. I can build them up as many levels down deep as I want, as well as I could also use the screen to, for example, get external rental fleets in there. For example, if I have a cross rental partner, I could get their rental equipment into this as well. Because as I said, and you can see that on the example over here, is that not everything needs to be your own fixed asset. These are all of my fixed assets and they are all serialized equipment. This is actually a non-serialized, non-fixed asset. So that is external equipment that you have as well. Then I have filters over here where I can filter this list by category and different attributes. So I can query within my fleet for different attributes. Maybe I want to know all of the cranes that have a certain chip length, or maybe are from a different manufacturer, have a certain attribute. Whatever you basically want to add on that, you can use that, and the system will filter down your list based on that. You might have also spotted in the screen immediately that you see this red diamond over here and the green hook. The red diamond and the green hook are a quick way of checking availability of equipment, because you can see here over on the right that I actually have my availability criteria activated. And availability criteria allow me to filter this fleet screen and define my on and off rent period for which I try to rent out that equipment, define a quantity that I'm looking for. If I leave the warehouse tab empty, I can actually check across legal entities the availability of equipment. So this is my whole fleet screen, and it allows me to check it across multiple locations as well. And we also have the capability of searching for alternatives. Now, if a rental company is being asked, do you have a 2-ton crane that does the job? And they say, yeah, we don't have a 2-ton crane, but we have one that can lift 3 tons. Then basically the crane would do the job. And therefore you have a working alternative based on your customer's demand. So we can map different kind of items to that and search the list like that. Next to that, the availability check then quickly symbolizes if something is available, yes or no. Green stands for available, red stands for not available. We actually have 5 statuses. You can also get insights. Yellow would, for example, mean is currently under maintenance. Another icon could mean it's currently reserved on a quotation, so available but promised to another customer, so should only be taken in emergency cases. And the 5th status is where you can define your own status and add that to that. So you can do availability checks based on that as well. If we then go into the details, you can actually see that I can click on this and then get into the specific record itself. So that's where I get the detailed view of this rental object. And on this rental object, I store all of my documents, like for example, an accident report or pictures or any kind of certificate that I would like to add with an expiry and an end date. I can see service object details and maintenance object details, so I can immediately jump into the service allocation from here. I can see that this crane is currently allocated to a project as well, and I can see at which address it is currently located, as well as I can set some standard utilization settings that are always picked once a price agreement or a specific rate hasn't been aligned, and I can update financial dimensions where I can allocate cost and revenue to. So that is the details view of a rental object, but there's more to the screen. The screen is really powerful and is typically, I recommend our customers to always have this tab open and use it to query for your fleet and find out the latest details and statuses about your fleet. We have even more sophisticated availability checks where I can, for example, say, now if I click on this is my parent rental object, by the way. So I can filter down into that list as well. I have my related information. This is basically my 360-degree asset lifecycle view. any kind of transaction from a fixed asset, maintenance, projects, inventory movement, financials, services, intercompany services can be accessed right from here. So if I now click this one, go into related information and go into rental transactions, you can actually see when it has been purchased and when it has been put on a rental order. And therefore I can see why it's currently away and when I expect to return it. A bit more into availability planning is actually our availability fleet breakdown. And that allows me to really drill down into the total fleet. With the fleet breakdown, I can set so-called settings from a time frame perspective of what I would like to look at. I can set filters, and filters allow me which storage dimensions, so warehouses, legal entities, and so on and so forth, I would like to check. And then I can define a period for which I want to check that rental operation. And then I simply say refresh, and you can see that we immediately break down the whole amount of fleet. So now every crane of the same type, which is my item number con 002, is being looked at, and from an availability perspective, we can check the different statuses. So I can see how many of them do I have on the fleet, how many of them are on rent, how many of them are on a quotation, quarantine means under service, and what do I expect to purchase in the future as well. So by there, and as I basically scroll down into this list, you can see that the amounts are changing and fluctuating as well. So I can see in this period, one of them is basically on rent. And then we also have the availability graph over here that shows me a little bit more from a visual perspective and standpoint what my availability of the fleet is. So if we think about the main concept of this presentation, maximizing equipment utilization, these screens are already really powerful because they help you really understand what is the status of my fleet? Can I rent it out? How can I most efficiently rent it out, as well as communicate with your customer for the optimized planning of it, and therefore renting out the cranes in a right manner. Knowing exactly when it comes back and knowing exactly when you can rent it out again helps you improve these records. If we then have a little bit more insights into actual utilization and performance, I can again click multiple of these and also the top rental record. If I click on that and click on balances, I actually get financial insights into all of my rental fleet. So now you can see how much money have I actually spent from a cost perspective, as well as how much revenue have I achieved from that perspective. What is the gross margin that I was achieving? Usage is our concept of service. So any kind of service or usage or leveraging this crane from a certain perspective and is related to that can give us insights as well. I can see how many days of rent on rent it has been, what's my utilization rate, and therefore I can also see, hey, this crane has not been utilized so much than the other two. So while checking the availability and the customer being on the phone, if I want to improve and maximize the utilization of one equipment because I was seeing it's not performing so well, then I can rent it out and suggest it proactively to my customer. These insights give your key user the capability of actively making choices that improve your utilization rate around that as well. And of course, I can scan the time frame and manage in which kind of period I would like to look from a financial perspective. So that's now a 2-year history view, but maybe I just want to see what has been going on this month. And then I can simply change and update these records as well. The system calculates the utilization for me again, and I will get an updated view once the calculation is done and understand what I had in this specific period. Let me quickly reload that. And once it's loaded, we get the insights into the reports. Allow me to go out one more time. I don't know, it seems, can you still hear me, by the way? Because it seems my laptop is freezing as well. Okay, that seems to look better. Let's do the balances one more time. And recalculated. Okay, it seems this one has not been rented out in that period. Let's take this one because I know for sure. Yeah, and then you can see it shows me the complete utilization for this specific time frame and period that I've chosen. So that is how we can get insights into utilization, into financial performance of the rental fleet. There's more capabilities that we have. We can also track objects from a map and IoT perspective. I mark this one as IoT enabled. So if I click this on a rental object and map perspective, and if I now open up the Google Maps, then we can actually see, based on GPS and IoT data, or based on the latest transaction, where this equipment has been. Since it has been rented out, it's now picking up here the latest address where it has been shipped to. But I can also zoom out and get more capabilities on that, as well as these texts can be marked, so we could do timestamps, other allocations to it as well, and therefore I get a good overview where my current equipment is, as well as I can create a route or a travel time towards it from that standpoint. Then that being said, there is more capabilities we have from a planning perspective. If we move into our scheduling overview on the rental management and then scheduling overview, we have a rental operations planning board. And that rental operations planning board allows me to plan and dispatch human resources alongside machines. Here you can see how our planning board looks like. With the planning boards, and allow me to quickly explain that screen, we can look at the same fleet that I was looking at before, but as well also at our human resources. We can create so-called scheduling groups. So you could, depending on what kind of location you're at, plan your rental operations. You could also have a global fleet planning, or you could have maybe certain teams that you would like to plan. You can see that we have human resources over here, as well as machines. So the blue ones are human resources and the black ones are my rental cranes. Underneath that, you can see I have rental order lines. So these are the inquiries my customers have, and these are the rental orders and the demands that basically drive the planning, and we can drag and drop these rental operations onto the plan board and therefore allocate time to it. We can plan 5 different types of operations. First of all, we can plan rental orders or quotes. So you can reserve equipment with that and you can put it on a rental order. We can plan rental usages. So these are services that go alongside your rental order, as well as maybe operating the crane or usage in form of an hour meter that can be planned and dispatched. You have service tasks. These are the typical field service maintenance scenarios. So really repair service kind of work that you can plan and dispatch. Leave and absence of your human resources. And reference is actually linking this to a project activity. So you could do a whole work breakdown structure planning on that. You could also have a schedule group that's called after a certain project. Think about, you have a large construction site and you have multiple equipment and resources that you need to plan alongside that. Then you can leverage this scheduling board and plan your project and all of the operations that are allocated to it via this planning board. You can then also see your operations in here. So here I can see I have an inspection. In that case, that is black. I have some quotes, they are pink, and I have some rental orders, they are green. So with different color codes, we can also visualize the different type of transactions that you plan on dispatch to it. Here on the right, I then get my details, as well as I again have a map view that gives me insights where my rental equipment, as well as where which operation is taking place. On the usage and on the service tasks, I also have the capability of setting up so-called resource requirements and mapping and dispatching these resource requirements and attaching, for example, information like site access, descriptions, any kind of document that you would like to store. You can start and stop certain service operations, and with color codes, we can also track different substatuses of the operations. So I can, for example, see that this one here is in status scheduled already, and it would turn, for example, yellow once the service technician starts his work. So this allows me to really drag and drop and plan my whole operations, and gives me the capability and flexibility of having everything within one view. This view can be user specific. So a planner and dispatcher of Berlin would see different things like a planner and dispatcher of Amsterdam, for example. And what I also have is I can simply say drag and drop over here and then create, for example, a rental quotation right from within the screen. This will now create a pop-up for me and fetch all of the information from the crane as well as the customer, and then create a quotation and a reservation for that specific time frame. That is the planning board. With the planning board, now you can see the quotation has popped up, so I could create that. Let's skip that process for now and go actually into the operation example that I've prepared. Now we can either create the rental operation from within the screen, or you could create a rental operation from within the rental object search. If I take my object 188 as an example, and then go into orders. Also from here, I can create services, quotations, or orders, as well as I can add to existing orders and quotations. I'm going to jump the quotation for now because I want to show you the capability of creating a rental quotation later on from within Dynamics 365 Sales, because we have an integration into Dynamics 365 Sales, and salespersons sometimes want to leverage the capability of our CRM system. Be aware, you can do the quotation in both systems. You could do it within this ERP framework, but you could also do it within Dynamics 365 Sales or another CRM system, like for example Salesforce. Some of our customers are using that as well. You then have your new order where you could, for example, say I want to ship this to a specific customer. I want to ship it from a site and warehouse. This is my header information. You will always be able to detail down that into a more granular level on the order itself. And it is now taking over all of the information from the item, as well as all of the attributes that we've basically searched on the rental object search. The order is now being created. All of the information is taking over. And now we can jump into the details of this specific rental order. Information like on rent date, item number, and everything has been defaulted based on the information. And that is how a rental order or a rental agreement typically looks like. What you now see is that we have our header on top of here. With the header, we can default things. We could say that we do intercompany rentals. Now we can use that same order stream to also do intercompany transactions, but we can also use order types to template certain capabilities. For example, if something is a short-term rental, if it should renew in 1 month or in 6 months. So the order type allows you to template most of the information. Then price agreements, calendar, and invoice profile are being fetched from the customer, and storage dimension has been allocated in the beginning on the order header. We then have our rental order lines, and notice as I click save how the kit and the component structure of this specific rental object can be loaded in, as well as how automatically services and usages. So every time I rent this crane, installation and hour meters are allocated to it as well. So we can automatically add physical kits, as well as we can automatically add services that go alongside that. And over here, you basically create your physical operation, your items, and underneath here, you can create your services that you want to offer alongside your rental operation. These are all line details, and on the line details, we can still override certain things. For example, we have our rental dates. We have 2 types of dates, one physical and one financial date. Physical date is the period where the object physically remains on the customer side, and that sometimes differs from the financial period, because maybe the customer has contractual wise rented out the equipment from Monday till Friday, but he keeps it till late Friday evening, and therefore we can't arrange a transport anymore. So we can only get the equipment physically back on a Saturday or maybe even a Sunday. So that's why we splitted these, also from an availability perspective, that you can get the insights into, is it physically already at my place? Has the financial contract already ended? These dates can synchronize, but they might differ from that standpoint. As well as I also have the capability of always adding additional lines. So I could add another crane over here. I could leave it as a category, so that's just the type crane over here now, or I could always allocate a certain serial number. Of course, this can be picked through the standard Microsoft modules and capabilities, but you also have the capability of manually assigning these bits and pieces. And as I do that, notice how, again, the system suggests me to add a certain component, maybe some quick stage base plates, as well as I have mandatory supplementary items. That would then be the example of a kit. So this is included in this specific serialized crane. Or I have optional supplementary items, and that is a bit a cross-sell, or customers that always have bought this often buy that scenario as well. So that is what I can make feasible with that. And if I simply say, okay, it's going to add these specific lines into my agreement. And notice how the services have been added to that as well. You can also notice that this now is actually an example of a bulk equipment. So no serial number. And that is how we can add different kind of types of rentals. In essence, we take the inventory type, and the inventory type also allows us to sell equipment on this specific agreement at the same time. Or to say, I want to give it the leasing logic, maybe different kind of structures as well. Or to start a so-called cross-rental process. So getting the equipment from a different vendor and then simply creating a purchase order that is allocated to that agreement. Each line detail can be different. So we might have this crane is coming for that time frame and period, while the other one might stay on the agreement a little bit longer. So I can simply save that and therefore update the record. What we also have is then, of course, the capability of leveraging standard Microsoft functionalities. So you see your picking and packing, your invoice generation over here. If we now want to start this agreement, we can pick equipment from the warehouse. I'm not going to jump into that level of detail, so I'm just going to ship it and post a packing slip to it. You can leverage both Microsoft modules from that standpoint. And now I can see the line details of my agreement. And as I post the packing slip, I change the status of this rental equipment into delivered. And with posting the packing slip, obviously a document can be generated in your corporate design, but that's all standard Microsoft. And now the equipment should be shipped towards the address that has been put on the line details. I can see the operation is completed. The status of that rental order changes into delivered as well. And if I go into rental status, then indeed all of them have changed their status into on rent. On here, I can now change price and discounting. Obviously, I can do that in the quote state already and fix that down, but I can still adjust prices. I could change the price profile. I could change the rate type, daily, monthly, weekly, but we also have things like sections, different kind of capabilities that you would like to add, as well as hour meters that can be allocated to it. And I can also have rental rates in different time frame and prices. So maybe 1 month the customer pays daily, the other month he pays weekly. So scenarios like that are possible as well. I also have the capability of getting insights into my financial performance. So therefore I can go into the rental charges and forecast from a quote and a rental level of what am I earning with this agreement in which kind of period. So that's my expected revenue for May, and that's my expected revenue for June. And then I can see where that revenue is basically coming from the different rates, as well as I also get insights into the expected costs that I have alongside that rental agreement. Services that we have created over here, they pop up on the schedule board, can be allocated to a human resource so they can execute it. You can start, stop certain services from here, and you can set up as many usage types as you want. These can also be fees, like for example, adding an environmental fee. And that makes it really powerful because we add that usage to your rental order line. You can see this is linked to the first crane and these are linked to the second crane. And that means we can allocate cost and revenue of your fleet from a service perspective as well. Again, maximizing and improving your utilization of your equipment and the revenue that you actually make out of it, because you can really drill down into what kind of cost has been allocated to it. Then we can generate invoices or do things like a customer advance payment. We have processes to create a rented as. So that's the 2K, 3K ton crane example. You can exchange equipment once it breaks down. You maybe need to replace it with a different component. And also in here, the availability checks that I was showing you before are accessible right from that screen. Let's create an invoice. An invoice can be created over here. Obviously, in a real life scenario, you could also do that via a batch job and run that in the background. You see here, run in the background. I can define the reoccurrence. I can define alerts, as well as I can allocate it to batch groups. So customer that want to be invoiced at the end of the month, get their invoice at the end of the month, and all of that can be run in schemes and schedules if needed. I'm processing one now manually to show you specifically for this agreement how you can create a so-called invoice proposal. That invoice proposal is like a pro forma invoice that we can second check if everything has been included. And based on the statuses of the services and the transactions, the fees and items will pop up in that area. And now you can see my invoice proposal has been created. And if I jump into that, then I can see the details over here, again, from a cost and revenue perspective. Here I can see the different prices and what I'm about to charge. And then I can simply add lines, create additional fees, change, split them, modify sales tax, different capabilities. And if I'm happy with my invoice, I can simply post it and it will create an actual invoice. Last but not least, we have the collection order process that allows me to collect equipment, and the collection order process allows me to also do so-called site clearances, or say I only remove one component. We said one crane is going to stay a little bit longer, so I'm going to remove this one. And with removing that, the other crane remains on the site while I collect that specific one. I can generate the so-called collection notes. So that's sending a technician to pick up the equipment that we see over here. He then can register that collection, and there we have proposed against collected quantity, because sometimes equipment goes missing. And if I then say, okay, one I'm missing of the quick stage base plates, I can give a reason code of why it went missing, as well as the status to that as well. And once I register that, the items are now collected again, and I can create services from here if I need. And with the check-in notes, I'll basically put them into my depot again, and they actually become available from a stock perspective if there's no post-rental inspection that is blocking the availability. Yeah, and with that, that was really a high-level overview of the processes that we can do. There's more in the tool if we drill down into the details. What I would still like to show you now is actually how we can leverage CRM for quoting purposes, and therefore I've created such an example of a rental quotation line. And yeah, you can see over there that this is the standard Dynamics 365 quote, and we have modified it to have some rental information over there, like the price agreement, the rental rates types, what kind of rental order type it is, the dates that I've just been showing you before. And on a quote line perspective, we can actually then add a rental object, and that rental object then can have its own rates and capabilities. And once we win that quote, we can actually integrate it and directly turn it into a rental order in Dynamics 365 ERP. And here you can also see the different rate types that we've allocated, so the price lists are being fetched from that kind of standpoint. We also have created a Power App for availability checks, and that is something that I would like to show you in a few screenshots that we've prepared. So this slide deck is actually containing more information. It will be shared later on with you, some screenshots of things we've done at customers, as well as things we believe we can improve with that application. We, for example, created a Power App for Account 360 that drags information out of ERP, embeds it into Dynamics 365 CRM, and gives you quickly an overview of what kind of rental contracts, work orders, site visits, which fleet accounts that they have, as well as from an availability check perspective, allow you to do such an equipment assessment. So for example, as a sales guy, I want to check the availability. Once again, as you've seen in the rental object search view, we've embedded that Power App to check the ERP stock for different attributes, what kind of type of machine it is, what fork length is needed, in which terrain is it going to be used, and that filters down then your fleet list into these capabilities. You can find the right equipment over there, and if you see it's, for example, not available, then you can request an alternative via that Power App, as well as you can build the configuration of that component from a sales perspective. So that is something that we've realized for a customer in the equipment material handling space recently, and they, oh, sorry, a bit too quick there. And they leverage that to drive their sales from a CRM perspective as well. That being said, we now came to the end of the webinar. It was a high-level overview to show you how you can maximize your rental equipment utilization. There's a lot of capabilities in that tool that you can use to improve that record. But please remember, I think the key aspect is with all of these transactions, your goal should be improving this table, managing your fleets, understanding how they utilize, leveraging the rental balances view that I was showing to you before, and improving these records based on statuses, based on transactions, and real insights into your rental operation. That being said, let's open up the space for questions. Is this rental CE integration a dual ride integration? The answer to that is no. We have created a virtual entity framework for that. So we at HSO Innovation have an integration framework that we leverage. Virtual entities are one way of connecting, for example, via Microsoft Azure Logic Apps, these capabilities, and that's how we integrated that. Dual ride is not leveraged from that standpoint, no. Can you use the advanced warehouse management module with this? Yes. All of the standard Microsoft modules can be connected and used from that standpoint. We see customers that leverage the inventory management module, and we have customers that leverage the advanced warehouse management module. Both can be used. And then there's another one coming in. How many customers do you have in the material handling space? In the material handling space, I would have to, let me think. I think it's 6 at the moment. Yeah, we see that material handling is something we gain a lot of interest recently, and really one of our focus markets. Can I start a rental from a project? Yeah, indeed. That is something that I mentioned before, that we have a deep link into the project, and that's actually, if you look on your rental orders over here, any kind of line can be linked to a project in the background and into an activity as well as into project categories. So if you go into one of the projects, just as an example to quickly showcase you that, we can open up the standard Microsoft project module. That's what you see over there. That's what we are right in. And you can actually leverage this as umbrella for all of your rental operations. So you can create new rental quotations from here. You can create rental orders. You can invoice, as well as any kind of transaction that is posted underneath this can be captured on a higher level. So if we look at this, for example, here I have all of my transactions for my customer Bredenort. I could get insights into all of these rental charges and all of the open transactions he still have, as well as all of the capabilities you could do on a rental order. You can do that right away from a project as well. And that gives you the capability of taking the project as an umbrella and posting multiple operations underneath there, and then mass invoicing based on that project. Then I see. Hey Max, thank you so much for this, such a valuable presentation. Just a question, not sure if this was covered, but can we charge customers for deposits, one-off charges as well? Yes, on the rental order itself, you can have so-called prepayments, as well as you could also add miscellaneous charges. So both from a crediting as well as debiting perspective, we can do one-off charges, deposits, as well as add certain fees to that. And that's what you have if you go into a rental order. And let's take this one as an example. Then in here on the invoicing, you can request a so-called customer advance. That would be the example for a deposit. You can do on account transaction, so any kind of financial value that you want to post against it can be added over here, or so-called miscellaneous rental charges, where you could simply say, I want to add a certain charge code to even a specific object, and then you could say credit, debits, fees, anything that you would like to add can be done over there, and that can be either an amount or by a day ratio that you would like to apply. Can you purchase right into fixed assets? Yes, Dynamics 365 standard purchasing can be leveraged, and based on the inventory type, we could actually automatically create a rental object once you purchase or even produce something. So we have a trigger for that then allocates all of the costs as well as the revenue and financial information into your fixed asset, and therefore automatically creates that record for you as well. So you don't have to manually create that fixed asset. That's another capability of the tool. If there is no further questions, please feel free to always ask question afterwards. My colleague Sukuta will reach out to you, will share the recording of this presentation as well as the PowerPoint with some additional information around our tooling with you. We hope you liked the session. And once again, a big thank you for everyone that also joined the morning session and experienced. Okay, I see there's another question popping up. Let's answer that still. In case a rental vehicle is damaged while in a rental contract, how do we track the service repairs done on the rental vehicle? Is there a separate contract maintenance for the rental vehicle? So you had the usage lines on the rental order. They can create services for you, as well as there's two routes you can basically go. There's standard Microsoft Enterprise Asset Management, and there's our Dynamic Service Management. So there's service solutions that you can use, and they both link to the project. So on a project, we can do common invoicing, consolidate these invoices, combine a rental invoice with a service invoice, as well as a rental object is also a service object, or an enterprise asset management an asset, and therefore we can track it on these records. So we have a 360-degree life cycle insight into that. Okay, and then I receive a few thank yous for everyone that attended. Once again, really thank you for your time and attention. We hope you liked the session, and should there be any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. I wish you a wonderful evening or morning, depending on wherever you are in the world right now.